All right, welcome in everyone to today's deep dive. We're going to be talking about the world of autistic adults. And we're really excited about kind of going beyond just the childhood aspect of autism that we hear so much about and really diving into what it's like to be an autistic adult. So we have this really, really powerful blog post here. It's titled Autism and Adulthood. The battle you didn't know was happening behind closed doors. And it's
powerful title.
It is. And it really does kind of give us a window into some of the challenges that folks are facing that often go unnoticed.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so important about this piece, right? Because we talk about autism awareness and we talk about it as it relates to children, but then that conversation just kind of stops there.
Oh, exactly.
But those children grow up.
Yeah.
They become adults, and so the challenges don't just disappear.
Exactly.
They evolve.
Yeah, and speaking of those challenges, there's this one line in the blog post that really stood out to me. The author says, suddenly I was expected to navigate social dynamics I didn't understand, work environments that required constant masking, and relationships where I was expected to behave normally. And it just struck me as like, wow, you're entering this whole new
ball game.
Yeah, without even knowing the rules.
And the stakes are higher.
Yeah.
Right, because now we're talking about employment.
Right.
Relationships. Yeah. Societal expectations that often just aren't built with neurodiversity in mind.
And that pressure to conform to mask, as the author calls it, that was really powerful.
Yeah.
They describe it as wearing a mask that didn't quite fit and could never be taken off.
And it's important to understand that, masking is more than just putting on a brave face. For autistic individuals, it can involve really suppressing natural behaviors and responses so that they fit in with neurotypical expectations. And it's exhausting. It's like constantly analyzing social cues, trying to decipher all these unspoken rules.
Yeah.
And just feeling like you have to perform in every interaction. That is emotionally and mentally draining.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, like, why is this battle so silent? Why aren't we talking about this more?
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to the stigma surrounding autism itself. You have a lot of adults who feel this pressure to hide their diagnosis because they're afraid of judgment or discrimination. And then you also have the lack of understanding around sensory overload and how autistic individuals experience the world, which can make it really, really hard to articulate their needs or to ask for accommodations.
It sounds so isolating.
Yeah.
To be dealing with all of that internally, but not having it recognized or validated.
Absolutely. And it can lead to a really deep sense of loneliness. Even when you're in a crowded room, the author actually talks about feeling light years away from everyone else. And I think that really emphasizes the social barriers that a lot of autistic adults face.
Yeah. And they talk about, struggling to initiate conversations or even to ask for help. And those are things that so many of us take for granted.
Absolutely. I mean, can you imagine trying to navigate the world when it feels like everyone else got the instruction manual, but you didn't, right? You might be able to figure out some of the basics, but you're constantly worried about making a mistake or hitting a roadblock. And that's kind of the reality for a lot of autistic adults.
Yeah.
Trying to get by in a world that's not really designed for them.
And it goes beyond just the social piece, right? The author talks about sensory input, like the heightened sensitivity, and it's not just about loud noises or crowds, it's even subtle things like fluorescent lights or the texture of certain fabrics.
Exactly. That can be incredibly overwhelming. Sensory overload is a real thing.
Yeah.
And it can be debilitating. And things that might seem like just minor annoyances to some people can be intensely distracting or even painful. Imagine having the volume turned up on all of your senses.
Yeah.
All the time. It's like you can't filter out information. You can't focus.
I mean, for someone who hasn't experienced that, how can we even begin to grasp what that's like?
Well, think about a time when you were super stressed or anxious, right? Maybe you had to give a big presentation or you were stuck in a loud, crowded place. And just remember how hard it was to concentrate, how even little things seemed to bug you. Now imagine feeling that way almost all the time. That's kind of what sensory overload can feel like.
Wow. That really puts it into perspective. And it just makes you realize how much energy goes into managing daily life when you're constantly dealing with that.
It's exhausting, which is why, it's so important to create environments that are sensory friendly, whether it's at home or in public spaces.
Yeah.
Even something as simple as dimming the lights or offering noise-canceling headphones can make a world of difference.
This makes me think about the broader societal piece.
Yeah.
If we're talking about welcoming spaces, accommodating spaces. I mean, that requires a huge
it does.
shift in understanding.
Yeah. It's not enough to just be aware of autism. We need to really understand and embrace neurodiversity. We need to challenge our assumptions about what's considered normal and recognize that different ways of thinking and experiencing the world are actually assets, not deficits.
And part of that shift is moving beyond childhood. We tend to focus so much on autism in children.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just disappear when someone turns 18. The challenges, they evolve.
Right.
But the need for support and understanding,
Yeah.
that doesn't go away.
Absolutely. We need to be advocating for policies and resources that support autistic adults in all areas of life: education, employment, healthcare, social inclusion. And most importantly, we need to listen to and amplify the voices of autistic individuals themselves. They are the experts on their own experiences.
Yeah, they're the ones who are living it day in and day out.
Exactly.
It's about hearing those individual voices, right?
that-
Because as you said, there's no one size fits all when it comes to autism.
Not at all. The spectrum is so diverse. What one person finds challenging, another might find easy, and vice versa. So it's not about, fitting into a box. It's about recognizing that there are so many different ways to experience the world.
And the blog post author talks about that, that lack of a clear roadmap for autistic adults and this expectation to navigate these complex systems like employment healthcare without much guidance or support.
That's a huge issue. And a lot of autistic adults really struggle to find employment. And it's not because they lack the skills. It's because the way we've structured our workplaces just creates so many barriers. You think about sensory overload, differences in social communication, the need for routine and structure.
It's like catch-22. You need a job to support yourself, but then the workplace itself can make it so difficult.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to advocate for things like workplace accommodations, more inclusive hiring practices, simple things, providing a quiet workspace, flexible work schedule, communicating expectations clearly. Those can go a long way in making a workplace more accessible and welcoming.
What about the healthcare system? I mean, what are some of the challenges there?
Well, one of the biggest obstacles is finding healthcare providers who are actually knowledgeable about autism in adulthood. A lot of professionals are trained to recognize it in children.
Right.
But when it comes to understanding the specific needs and challenges of adults, there's a big gap.
It's like you're transitioning from this pediatric model to an adult model.
Yeah.
And the systems don't always talk to each other.
Exactly. And, autistic adults might have different communication styles, different sensory sensitivities that healthcare providers need to be aware of.
So it really requires an adjustment in their approach.
Yeah, for example, a doctor might need to break down complex medical information into smaller chunks or, provide a quiet, low-stimulation environment for an exam.
It seems like clear communication is key in all this. But the blog post really highlights how challenging that can be.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to disclosing a diagnosis.
Right. It's a tough decision for a lot of people. There's always that fear of judgment, discrimination, being treated differently.
And
unfortunately, a lot of times, that fear is justified.
Yeah.
We still have so much stigma and misinformation around autism, and disclosing it can have real consequences, especially in employment and social situations.
So how do we even begin to create a society where folks feel safe and supported to be their authentic selves, where disclosing a diagnosis isn't a liability?
That's the goal, right? But it starts with education. We need to increase awareness and understanding across all sectors of society, from schools to workplaces, healthcare systems, community organizations, and we need to create platforms for autistic individuals to share their own experiences and perspectives.
You mentioned earlier amplifying those voices. How can we do that more effectively?
Well, one way is to seek out autistic creators, writers, speakers, follow them on social media, read their books, attend their presentations. Another way is to support organizations that are led by and for autistic individuals. These organizations are doing amazing work. They're on the front lines of advocacy, and they often have a lot of valuable resources and information.
This deep dive has really highlighted the need for a multifaceted approach, right? It's not just about individual acts of kindness or understanding. It's about systemic change, addressing those root causes of inequity, and really creating a society that values neurodiversity.
That's it. We need to be looking at the structures and the systems that are creating these barriers. We need to advocate for policies that promote inclusion, access, and support. And we need to call out ableist attitudes and assumptions wherever we see them.
That sounds like a tall order. Where do we even begin?
I know it can feel overwhelming, but every little step counts. Start by educating yourself. Learn about the lived experiences of autistic adults. Challenge your own biases and be an ally.
I keep thinking back to the author's words about feeling like you're in a constant battle, fighting for acceptance and understanding. And it makes me wonder just how much energy is spent simply navigating a world that wasn't built for them.
That's such an important point. Imagine if we could redirect that energy towards pursuing passions, contributing to society, just living a fulfilling life without that constant burden of having to mask or explain themselves.
It's almost like we're asking autistic individuals
Yeah.
to constantly translate themselves
Yeah.
for the benefit of the neurotypical world. What if we flipped the script? What if we started asking ourselves how we can change the world to be more accessible and welcoming?
That's a much better approach. What if instead of seeing neurodiversity as a problem to solve,
Well.
we saw it as a source of strength, innovation, creativity?
I mean, it really makes you rethink that whole idea of normal, right?
It does.
Like, who gets to decide what's normal and who are we leaving out when we draw those lines?
Because the idea of normal is often used to create a sense of belonging, but it can also be incredibly exclusionary. It can lead to judging and categorizing people. And, when it comes to neurodiversity, those boxes that we create are just way too narrow. We need to broaden our understanding of what's possible, what's valuable, and what it means to live a fulfilling life.
I mean, just think about all the incredible things that...
Exactly. Autistic individuals have brought to the world.
Yeah.
In the arts, the sciences, technology, you name it. So imagine if we created a world where those talents and strengths were actually nurtured and celebrated instead of being stifled or dismissed.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. And, we've been talking about the personal experiences of this one autistic adult.
Yeah.
But I feel like it raises these...
It does. Bigger questions.
Yeah, about the kind of world we want to live in.
I completely agree. It's not enough to just acknowledge the challenges. We have to actively create a society where those challenges are minimized, where differences are embraced, and where everyone has the chance to thrive.
So for our listeners out there, what are some things they can do?
Well, I'd say the first step is to educate yourselves. Go beyond the stereotypes and the misconceptions about autism. Read books, watch documentaries, listen to podcasts. There are so many great resources out there.
And seek out those firsthand accounts, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Like listen to autistic voices, read blogs and articles written by autistic people, follow autistic creators on social media.
It's about centering their voices and their lived experiences.
And don't be afraid to. Ask questions and engage in dialogue, right?
Exactly.
Like challenge your own assumptions.
It's how we learn and grow.
So once we've started that learning process, how do we turn knowledge into action?
Well, look for those everyday opportunities to be an ally. Speak up when you see discrimination or prejudice. Challenge ableist language and attitudes. Support organizations that are promoting neurodiversity and inclusion.
And sometimes it's about those small actions, right? Like having a conversation with a friend, sharing an article on social media, just listening with empathy.
Exactly. It's about creating a ripple effect. You know, all those small acts of awareness and allyship, they can contribute to a larger societal shift.
I like that, a ripple effect. It reminds us that we're all connected, and even small actions can make a difference.
You really can.
And creating a more inclusive world isn't just about, helping autistic individuals.
Right.
It's about recognizing the value of neurodiversity.
The unique perspectives, the contributions that autistic people bring.
It's about building a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued for exactly who they are.
That's a world worth fighting for.
It is. And it's a world we can build together. One conversation, one action, one ripple at a time.
I love that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a more inclusive world.
Absolutely.